Welcome to the Black Father's Pulse, the podcast where fatherhood meets purpose. I'm Dr. Alvin Thomas, clinical psychologist and professor, here to guide you through the multifaceted journey of Black fatherhood. Please note, the views expressed here are my own and not those of my employer. But get ready to dive into the dynamic world of Black fatherhood, where we celebrate the highs, tackle the lows, and share plenty of laughs along the way. Let's keep the pulse of fatherhood beating strong and vibrant. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge that this conversation about spanking and discipline may bring up strong feelings, personal memories, and even disagreement, and that's okay. This episode isn't about shaming Black parents or dismissing the very real fears that we have for our children's safety. It's about having an honest conversation, a research-informed conversation rooted in the love for our children and respect for our ancestors. We're honored to have experts from the Rainbow Project, a Madison-based organization that has served children and families with trauma-informed care since 1980. They're here to help us navigate this very complex topic. We're joined by Eric Crawford, a Black father, a PhD candidate at University of Wisconsin-Madison, and a licensed professional counselor whose work centers group education, BIPOC parenting, trauma, and family well-being. And those of you who've been longtime listeners to the Black Fatherhood podcast and now the Black Father's Pulse podcast will remember Eric from previous episodes and also him being a co-producer of the Black Fatherhood podcast. We also have with us the Rainbow Project's founder and executive director, Cheryl Cato, a licensed professional counselor who's committed to addressing the cultural impact and history of trauma for children and their caregivers and families. She is also a clinical adjunct professor in the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Wisconsin School of Medicine and Public Health. They do the work to help parents They do the work to help parents interrupt intergenerational cycles of trauma. Welcome, Eric and Cheryl.
Thank you. An honor to be here.
Your son just talked back to you in a grocery store, and everybody's watching. And suddenly your mother's voice echoes in your head. If you don't get control of that child, and your hand twitches, you remember your father's belt. You remember the lesson you learned, and you remember promising that you would never, ever do this to your children. Today, we're having the conversation that every Black father wrestles with, the one that makes us defensive, the one that our grandmothers might not agree with, but the one that our children need us to have. Today, we're talking about spanking. I want to start by saying, I know why Black parents spank. I understand the fear. I understand the "I turned out fine" argument. I also understand that we love our children fiercely and want to protect them from a world that doesn't always love them back. Let's start with what we know. How common is spanking in Black communities compared to other communities?
So when it comes to how common it is for Black families in comparison to other families, I think there's different results or there's different outcome based on who studied. One of the things we do know, or that's consistently shows up in research, is that it's more. I think there was one study that said sometimes it's 3 times as much Black parents use spanking 3 times as much as other different race parents. There's other studies that might say it's more, but maybe not as exaggerated as could sometimes seem in popular media or literature. So what I can say consistently, it looks like there's more consensus that is more. And I guess throughout our conversation, we'll probably address where that might come from and where that is. Also related to that research is that Black parents tend to endorse more openness to using spanking. And that I think it's also linked to this whole history of being here. There tends to be a more open attitude about spanking and corporal punishment in black communities compared to other or black families compared to other uh, race parents and families. Uh,
So I'm actually going to go right into allowing you to expand on that. So specifically in your work with families at the Rainbow Projects, what do Black, and I know that this conversation probably comes up every so often in your work with parents, but what do Black parents tell you about why they use corporal punishment? What are they trying to accomplish? I know that the Pew Research Center in a 2015 study kind of corroborates what you were saying, Eric, that Black parents were twice as likely to spank, or were spanking at twice as high a rate as white or Latino parents. So why are they saying they're
yeah.
using corporal punishment, and what are they really trying to accomplish?
I think I'm going to
Yeah,
jump
sure, sure.
in. I'm going to jump in because I think there's such a wide range. So, a part of it is respect for others and wanting their children to behave. And the other is sometimes control,
Mm,
making sure that they see that they are able to have others be respected by their child's behavior. The other is, and it's difficult raising children of color in a biased world,
mhm,
and so you also are wanting them to be tough and sturdy and strong and prepared for some of those struggles. So I think that's some of it. The other is sometimes not having the best um, expectations.
mhm.
So a mom may want to be proud and have her child excel and be toilet trained at 10 months old, and is upset when they're not because it's not something that they're able to do. So sometimes it's really misdirected in terms of expectations as well, and wanting a
Yeah,
good
yeah. If I can
outcome
just,
for their
excuse me, if
child.
I can, excuse me, if I can just elaborate on what Cheryl said, or just even kind of highlight certain parts of what she said. When we're talking to Black families, or some of what I've heard even in my work with Black families, is they're trying to teach them. And in terms of the control thing, is compliance, wanting to prepare them for the world, wanting them to have to
Mhm.
value respect, and we know in the research that's another way of saying preparation for bias, understanding like the world in which how the world sees them,
Right,
really
right.
wanting their children to be able to operate at a way that might not even match their development. And so a lot of it comes from this fear, like, I know I'm
Mhm.
sending you out in this world, and the world's going to treat you more harshly than this, so I need you to be ready. If I treat you harshly, or tough love, because they're not using the word harsh, if I'm tough, then that means the world,
Mhm.
you can avoid some of the toughness of the world. That's the thought.
Go ahead, Cheryl.
When you were asking about cultural identity, even we had a mom in our parenting group that said she couldn't go to these other groups, even though they were facilitated by African American parents, is
Mhm.
because she was admonished for not spanking.
Mm,
So there was that sort of, am I true to my culture, and there are
right.
pressures sometimes. I do think that since, and it's interesting and studied from 1980 to now, that there has been a shift in redefining the way that Black parents are um, they're disciplining their children.
So what I'm hearing across both of what you're sharing, or what you shared, was this sense of fear, and it's something that I hear with from a lot of fathers, that they feel this sense of fear, um, both for their children, as far as whether or not they're meeting their milestones, they're doing the things that they should be doing, um, whether they're developing appropriately, whatever appropriately looks like, or they think appropriately looks like. And like you were saying, Eric, that preparation for bias, preparation for a world that is tough as nails and is going to treat you as tough as nails. And I am afraid of how this might break you and destroy you. And I want to prepare you by
Mhm.
doing it the Spartan way. If I can toughen your skin, then you can take anything the world dishes out at you. And that sounds like parenting to me. That sounds like appropriate parenting. That sounds like the kind of parent who loves their child. Now, there's what you want versus the means that you use to get what you want or what you hope for your child. So there's this belief that spanking is part of Black culture, as Cheryl was just talking about, passed down through generations. But your organization, Cheryl, works from a trauma-informed perspective. What does the research tell us about the actual origins of corporal punishment in Black communities? And feel free to jump on that as well, Eric.
Well, I think that there are some myths out there as far as what is assumed. There is research on how Black parents in slavery were able to parent their children. And it was very much through eye contact, in being able to control where they are, safety, and being able to go back and forth with them. There are so many wonderful things about lap babies and some of the toys that were made. There are some myths about that I think we can actually benefit from today, rather than assuming that it is all negative. But then you think about cultural history of trauma, and you think about um, how how to sort all of that out with their relationship with their child, because I think trust is one of the most fundamental secure based um, milestones for a parent and a child. And I think that that's something that's challenged and heightened for many families that we work with. But it's also, what is the society saying about parenting? What is the family saying about what is good or bad? And that is going to impact. We really are looking at how to show parents the results of different kinds of parenting. I think that's the knowledge and the balance that is made, because so many of the kids are also dysregulated and fearful. And what is the outcome from a well intentioned um, purpose? But they're really, I have heard parents tell me, but what you're saying is very soft. It's going to make my child soft and vulnerable. But when there is that understanding that actually it's going to give them these protective factors that will have them believe in themselves no matter what people tell them, it helps them balance that, because otherwise there is a self-concept. If they are chronically they're using corporal punishment, that then dissuades the purpose that they're hoping for, and it
And
makes them
if I
feel
can just
negative.
like say it like kind of put it in a metaphor. So I'm not I don't build homes, but in my head this is how I think of it. I hope it works out. Um, I think the tough love that you can when intention does not equal impact, and tough love is almost like building a house with broken rocks. Trying to, and I think there's a way that you might use a mortar and stuff, but and we're using leaning into attachment and the relationship between the parent child, and forming a secure attachment and a secure base. It's like pouring in like a cement that's allowed to kind of cure without fractures. Uh, that's how I like to look at it. Like the tough love, I get it. We want to build this strong. I'm breaking them down so they can be stronger. When no, you can actually just pour. Let's pour into them to build a secure base. Build. One of the things we know about attachment is like children who feel more secure take healthier risk, engage in healthier risk. They're free to explore their own competence and capacity, and it propels them to, I guess, for more growth. Whereas with corporal punishment, and when we say corporal punishment, I should have started off with this, but when we say spanking or corporal punishment, it's not just spanking. We're talking about the pinching, the popping, we any use of like physical discipline to inflict some kind of discomfort or pain, I think with the intention to teach, to bring some kind of attention to a particular behavior for a child and to reduce that behavior. But and that, I think that intention is well. I think it's usually well intended. It just doesn't land or result in positive. The research is clear. I think 50 years of research now is clear that it doesn't result in positive outcomes. In fact, it puts children at higher risk of adverse outcomes or problems later on, well into adulthood.
So what I'm hearing is, for the fathers out there, for the parents out there, your fear is real. Your concern about your child's safety in this world is real. Your intentions are good, but there's something that we need you to know. And let's talk about that something. When a child is spanked, what is happening to that child's brain? Walk us through the biology, if you could, of what's happening to this child as they're being spanked, or in preparation to being spanked and after being spanked. What exactly is being achieved in this child?
There are over 1,574 studies that find spanking is harmful. And this surprised me, even the everyday spanking is consistently associated with more aggression, more fighting, more negative relationships with parents and lower self esteem, more antisocial behavior. And unfortunately, I think it's the University of New Hampshire found children who were spanked at 2 and 4 years old had 5 to 10 less points in IQ. So we really are seeing some of the negative impact of spanking. And it doesn't mean that every spanked child is going to have a problem. That's the part that we're always saying, the either or, and making it very black and white, and it really is not. It means spanking, is every time we do that, though, we're risking the child's problems and behavior. And it isn't really helping them focus on what we want them to focus on. And I always use safety of a child running across the street. They see the emotions of the parent, and that parent wants to make sure that never happens again. But they're not going to be learning about crossing the street safety if they are hit. And it's similar to when you say, don't hit your sister, and you get hit. Those are the messages that are almost distracting from that incident that you really want them to learn. And instead of seeing your face, saying things like, I felt so scared when you did that, you're really then communicating. And that is going to have an impact on the child, not the hitting. And if it's constant, I've learned, and I've had children say, when I get bigger, I can spank, I can hit people. And so that, just to think about the messages in between there. But I was surprised that even the sort of lower level spanking, which I always think, if you have a strong, trusting relationship, some of those other things are curtailed a bit in terms of negative impact. So I do hold on to that. I hold on to the fact that if there is goodness there in terms of strength and relationship and empathy and kindness, that can help buffer some of the negatives. However, there still is this research that shows that even the lower incidence of spanking can be associated with all of these negative outcomes.
Absolutely, thank you. Like, in addition to like
Thank
just
you very much.
so Cheryl just kind of gave you a good overview layout of like those negative outcomes. And so even thinking about that original question, what happens in the brain is when you spank, you are reshaping a child's brain to be more sensitive to stress. Children who are spanked, especially consistently, have higher levels of cortisol. They're hypersensitive to stress, which means they start to view the world as a threatening and unsafe place. And that connects to these other things. You do see reductions in IQ scores. You compromise their ability to self-regulate their emotions. to even co-regulate because of the higher cortisols and stress levels. You create an individual who is going through the world scared because the person, especially because the person who's
Mm-hmm.
spanking them, is supposed to be the safe, secure individual. And if I can't trust this person, then who can I
Yeah.
trust? And that's we
Mm-hmm.
already existentially come into this world, if you will, alone in some ways. There's always this separation, but to be even farther, like ostracized or alienated from our main attachment figure, can't reasonably lead to positive outcomes. And I think the research just reflects that.
So as you were talking, Eric, I was thinking to myself um, that I could probably explain why we see this drop in IQ points, and people might be thinking, "Well, are you people suggesting that spanking makes kids dumb? Spanking makes kids less smart?" And I don't think that that is the argument. I think the argument is, or at least if I were to unpack that connection, is that spanking
Mm-hmm.
disconnects the child from the intelligence. So you have a child who is naturally intelligent, but if that child has experienced some kind of trauma, something that makes them feel less safe in their environment, they have this heightened expectation of discomfort, of danger in their environment. And so they're not predisposed
Mm-hmm.
to have all of their energies and intellect focus on the task. They're focused on what's happening around me, who's likely to hurt me, who who do I have to defend myself against, or who do I have
And you
to
do
Mm-hmm.
see that. You see
narrow
that.
myself down to? Yeah.
Yep.
So
Hypervigilance. Hypervigilance. Yeah. And
so
it detracts from the
Mm-hmm.
purpose.
so I'm thinking now, I know that I was spanked as a child. And a lot of fathers who are listening up are probably thinking,
Mm-hmm.
but I was spanked
Mm-hmm.
and I wouldn't say I'm dumb. I turned out just fine. How do you respond to that in your therapy sessions or in other spaces with parents when they're saying, "I turned out just fine. I'm doing very well for myself, and I was spanked." There, evidence, it worked.
Well, but usually when we see them, there's a reason that we see them. And so there are going to be times, and we observe in the classrooms, for example.
Mhm.
And I have witnessed a child who had been very gifted, smart, but he had some hyperactivity. And so the teacher decided to teach him to pay attention, was to call him upon him when she knew he wasn't listening,
Mhm.
so that she used shame to get his attention, that maybe that will help him pay attention. And that was the opposite experience for
Mhm.
him. He was not going to learn. He felt more ashamed. And so there are those kinds of self-esteem issues that come up of, oh, am I doing this wrong? Am I doing this right? You want self-esteem to grow and that I am lovable no matter, even if I make this mistake. So there is the vigilance too about that, in terms of either having high expectations to be perfect, or and I've seen it to the extreme, or I'm not going to even try because this is how I am.
So then, how do you get parents, and in this specific case, because we're on the Black Fathers Pulse podcast, how would you get Black parents to see this choosing of different disciplinary methods as a form of healing rather than as a form of betrayal to their culture, to their history, to their parenting patterns that they grew up with? How do you help them see this idea of choosing different discipline patterns as a form of healing?
Well, I can just talk about some of the actual activities that we do that are give and take, and they are structured. And then there is that feedback on how do they feel after they do these things in terms of regulating. What are the things you can do instead of? Because I think the positives are not always emphasized. It is control, it is shame to get them to quickly respond. And so I think those kinds of interaction, it's just that sometimes some kids learn that hurting or negativity is love.
Mm.
And it is not, helpful in terms of building a relationship.
So the idea of I'm beating you because
Yeah.
I love you, because I'm trying to protect you.
So it's a matter of strengthening attachment in a healthy way between the caregiver and the child. So that bond is one that is not intimidating, that is not based on shame, and is not based on having to be vigilant all of the time. And I think those are some of the things that help them be who they really are. And many parents understand that. They may, on a thinking level, understand it
Mhm.
because of how they grew up. But then eventually, I think our behaviors with them help them really experience it, not just talk about it, not just think about it. You have to actually experience it.
So I hear that, and to me, some of the language, at least for some of the fathers who might be listening, some of that language sounds
Okay.
so academic, educated, therapy talk. I've heard people say things like, raise the whole child, not just a
Mm-hmm.
well-behaved child. And that's a cute saying, but what does that look like? Like for the father
Mm-hmm.
who is trying to parent his 5-year-old son and needs him to brush his teeth, for the father who's trying to
Mm-hmm.
get his daughter to take a bath or to go to bed or to wake up in the morning or to stop a tantrum that they're throwing at the store or whatever it is. What does this raising the whole
Mm-hmm.
child, not
If I could
just the
just step
well-behaved
in
child,
there,
look like?
so when we talk about race, I think something that needs to be emphasized is meeting a child where they are developmentally. I'm thinking age and also thinking considering their own individual differences to their own neurodiversities. So when I think of kids around from about 0 to 7, one of the things that's really big is those kids engage a lot
Mhm.
through or primarily through play and imaginative play and fantasy. So whether you're in the store or whether it's for bath or even for brushing your teeth, you sometimes have to engage them through that, make it a game. And I know I see this even reflected in how
Mhm.
appealing some social media or YouTube edutainers are. The thing that really attracts the kids to these edutainers is they're fun, especially young kids. That's fun, and you sometimes
Mhm.
hear in personal or in parent spaces and stuff how annoying it could be, and they're having to compete with these edutainers. Teachers are also struggling with having to compete with these. But the truth is, kids from 0 to 7 engage through
Mhm.
play, and so that's one of those places where we can lean into. And in fact, fathers in particular naturally do better with this area. Fathers, a lot of the edutainers, and I think the popular ones, I don't know if you know this, are men. Fathers generally do better with just really being present in play. That doesn't
Mhm.
mean women and mothers can't do it. They can learn it, and it actually has still the same positive
Right.
outcome. So that's for a 5-year-old. That might be using puppets to get to talk to them about brushing their teeth or taking a bath, allowing them to use dolls
Mhm.
or have toys in the tub, changing your voice and allowing a character to embody you to them about the difficult things that might have happened at school. And so yes, we have to meet our kids where they are developmentally. For the 8 to 12 year olds, are almost pre-adolescent teens, you can engage them a little bit more in rational thinking, and at the same time they're in that in between where they still like a little bit of, they won't play. So doing tea time with an 8-year-old, like, oh, and making it a part of the family system to just to lean into the relationship and connection is important, and allowing them to also be like co-creators in what that looks like, what connection and connected time, family time looks like. Also giving them time where things aren't just focused on their behavior. As parents, there's a lot of pressure to just immediately go into the fixing, and the problem solving, and really what should be emphasized, and
Mhm.
hopefully
Mhm.
through this and other media, like what should be emphasized is that relationship, because kids are more likely to be more compliant, if you will. I can't think of a better word, when they feel connected, when they feel safe. Um,
Mhm.
yeah.
That's really important. I think I remember a tantrum that a child had in the waiting room at the clinic at Rainbow.
Mhm.
And the parent was yelling, bribing, doing all kinds of things. And one of the things we suggested was just to reflect. Isn't it
Mhm.
hard to leave a place when you're having so much fun?
Mhm.
And the child stopped the, you know, screaming, yelling, and everything. And she was lying down on the floor having the tantrum, and she just looked up at everyone and she nodded her head in
Mhm.
agreement. And she was able to get up. But it's also fun things like mom just said, you know what? You can take my car key and just put it in the car lock. So she gave her something to do when she got to the car in the park.
Mhm.
So those are the tricks kind of how you can connect, have fun, and not have to be ordering around and demanding constantly. I've
Mm.
worked with parents who it was
Thinking.
nonstop with every moment.
So here's an example. Um, so let's say a father who is listening right now, and he's convinced that he's ready to try something different because you guys have convinced him that there's potential danger in some of his practices, even though he is well intentioned. So he's like, okay, I'm going to try something different. When my son does something, I'm going to respond differently. But
Mm-hmm.
his son
Mm-hmm.
just broke his phone. So he has an iPhone 17,
Mm-hmm.
and his son somehow just broke it or dropped it in the toilet.
Mm-hmm.
Or his daughter just lied to him, like to his face. He asked her, did you eat the jelly beans? And she still has some little sugar residue around her mouth. He's like, no, I didn't. What does that dad in that moment do instead of spanking this kid who just dropped his phone or threw his phone in the toilet and tried to flush it, or ate a huge chunk out of mom's birthday cake that was going to be brought down for a party later?
Good
What
ways.
does
I
this
hope
dad
it's
do
okay,
instead of
Cheryl.
spanking?
So, what can that dad do?
Okay.
First, I wanted to step
Sure.
away and like look at big picture. Waiting until those moments happen is, I think, the trap a lot of us fall into.
Hmm.
One of the things we do in our clinical work, and just even in our practice with young kids outside of the clinic, is that kids give so many opportunities and moments to for us to affirm and reinforce the behaviors we want to see. So outside of those moments, right, where we'll call them maladaptive behaviors, or just when they're doing not meeting our expectations, we need to be like showering them with attention and praise and reinforcing the behaviors we do like to see in those. If
Hmm.
you do have a child who struggles with telling the truth and developmentally, that's appropriate. There's a lot. I think that range is from about once they realize you can't read their mind
Hmm.
to all the way through young adulthood. But if reaffirm praising and reinforcing when they do tell the truth. Oh, thank you for yeah, thank you for sharing that. Thank you for telling the truth, even if it's something that's difficult. I think we have to like kind of uh, turn up the volume on the praise in that way. In the moment, you got to ask
Hmm.
yourself again, big picture, what's most and you don't what you want to communicate to that
Hmm.
child, regardless
Hmm.
of the error, the mistake you made, the poor decision. I'm here, and really, I want to help you figure out how we can prevent this next time. Oh, hey, the phone. Yes, you can express your disappointment. Oh, I'm disappointed that you put the phone in the toilet. What happened? What's going on? Come over here.
Hmm.
Talk to me. And honestly, that can be so disarming for a kid who may come from a culture or context of spanking, because that's new. That's different.
Hmm.
They might even be a little on guard. Um,
Hmm.
but if you consistently show them that there's nothing you can do
Hmm.
to lose my love and my care, because what spanking communicates is that I
Hmm.
don't care.
Hmm.
Even if that's not your intention, that's what the child is getting. I don't.
It does require patience and control, but also self evaluation. in the moment, because that's strength, is to be able to think about how is it going to impact the child. Because if you also know, oh, this is the age where lying is really much, much more, so how are you going to respond to those different things so that you then get a worse reaction because you overreacted in another. So understanding your behavior and the impact, but it does require
Mm-hmm.
patience and understanding of child development and what's appropriate and not appropriate, and how do you also express anger. Um, there are some dads who just,
Mm-hmm.
and we take the time to show them how to
Yeah.
play because they
Yeah.
themselves have not had that opportunity.
So I hear the patience, I hear the understanding, and those are behaviors that take time to learn. Again, this same dad who has decided he's going to do things differently. The first time he tries something different, he goes through it, and hopefully the outcome is positive, maybe not so positive. But changing these patterns it's hard. It's hard work. And so a father might commit to not spanking,
Mm-hmm.
then in a moment of frustration, he does it anyway. What then?
I think we start whenever we're doing training with teachers or parents. I always like to start with just validating not the difficulty of it. It's difficult to raising and socializing a child to these things, rules,
Mhm.
and norms that don't feel natural. We're gonna, as we're switching, shifting systems or ways of being, it's gonna be difficult. I tell him, like, give himself a break. Like, as long as he's still well intentioned, give himself a break, give himself some time and grace. But what he needs to do
Mhm.
in that moment, or what could be really helpful in that moment, is repair. Now, repair, you can't keep slapping somebody and then keep repairing, but
Right.
he should repair. And what repair looks like is coming down to the child's level, letting them know how you like it. I think parents, specifically fathers, might struggle with this, but it's okay
Mhm.
to say I was wrong. I shouldn't yell. I shouldn't have yelled. You know what? Whipping, spanking you was not the best option,
Mm.
and I'm sorry that
Mhm.
I need to do better with figuring out what I can do in those moments when I'm having a challenge. Like even as a father, I'm just anecdotally, my new replacement behavior is actually to
Mm.
step away if I get if I'm feeling kind of flooded and like my only option is to spank or use physical discipline. I tell my son that
Mhm.
I need to step away for a minute. I need to go. Let me go step away. And then we'll come back to whatever's happening. I had a big parenting win the other day where there was food on the floor, and coming from a culture or
Right.
and family where you didn't waste food, that was hard. And I said, my son was like, it's like, Daddy, I'll clean it up. I was like, it's okay. Go ahead. I made him another plate.
Right.
Here, eat this. I just want to make sure you eat so you can get to bed on time. I can clean that up later. And that
Mhm.
was big. I actually felt, I will tell you, and it's those moments you can get there with just, but you have to, I think, find something that helps you replace. And for me, it's the
Mhm.
walking away. And I let them know, hey, I'm just stepping away. We'll talk about it. You're not in trouble. I just need to step away so I can kind of get my thoughts together.
Go ahead, Cheryl.
Well, I just know examples, and this is the where you're saying it is going to take time.
Right.
It really does, because you could have that same outcome, but you could have the extreme reaction of throwing that plate, screaming, yelling,
Mhm.
blaming. I work so hard for this money. I mean, those are some of the things that are always a continuum of, negativity when we're talking about that. It could be verbally, it
Mm-hmm.
could be emotionally, it could be physically when we're talking about corporal punishment.
So, at the very top of the conversation, we talked about the fear that Black fathers, that Black parents have for their children in a society that may not necessarily appreciate Black skin or Black culture or Black children. And so now we're telling these parents these ways that you've learned to keep children safe, the spanking, the hitting, the belittling, whatever else that you use, that we should step away from those. And so, of course, the obvious follow up question is, you're asking me to step away from these. How do I keep my child safe in a racist
I'm
world?
glad you asked that. Really, and so I think the best thing you can do, one, ripping off the band-aid. I think parents have to recognize
Right.
there's a limit to how to our own agency or ability to keep our kids safe. There's a limit to how our ability to keep ourselves safe. But something you can do as a protective factor, um, to support your children as they're developing and going through in this world, in the context in which we have to live in this racist society, is ensure them that they have a refuge in you. I think Bell Hooks calls it home place. Like we talk about, like during slavery, like I think one of the things that helped African Americans kind of get through those tough times, they had spaces. They were able to carve out spaces where they can kind of affirm that they weren't alone in how they were experiencing this tragedy, this travesty, this terrible period of existence and time. When your child knowing that I have a home space, I have a refuge, I have a place I can come to if I make a mistake, if I'm heartbroken, if somebody says something mean to me or something, some exhibits racialized aggression to me, I know where I can come to find peace, to find a sense of security, to feel grounded, to recenter. And honestly, corporal punishment and spanking threatens that home place.
Thank you so much for that. So our children are raised in community. So again, these fathers have decided that they're not going to spank, but the mother, the auntie, the church elders, the grandfather, the uncle, they're telling him, how did you buy into this gentle parenting nonsense? You're soft and you're raising soft children. You're raising disrespectful children. They're telling you whatever they want. They're talking back to you. They're being, you need to get your house under control. You need to get your kids under control. So there's pushback.
So one of the ways in which fathers can kind of push back to a community that may not be supportive of the ways in which they're trying to parent, outside of just ostracizing themselves and leaving that community, it's let them know what their goals and intentions are as a parent. Yeah, I'm doing this because I want my child to feel secure in me. And so, yes, please don't pinch my son, pop my son. However, this is what you can do. Um, I value giving my son voice and the ability
Mm,
to assert his own needs, to advocate for himself. Sometimes with and that might be a great opportunity for that parent to educate. Like, hey, I know it might feel like
mhm,
um, if my son is saying, or my child, and I'm saying son because I got a son, but if my child is saying something that feels disrespectful, come talk to me, and so we can work through it. Because I think sometimes there's confusion over what
mhm,
feels or what is disrespectful. A child expressing that they're
mhm.
angry might feel disrespectful to you. However, when we kind of stop ourselves and ground ourselves, we recognize, oh, that's a child who's actually communicating in the way that we should affirm. So that parent, that dad, what he can do is it take hopefully educate the people who are in the community who also are in that child's space and in that world, and just let them know, hey, instead of this, we're going to try this. So if he's having if he or she are upset, give them space. Sometimes if they're in the space where they can hear it, you say, "Hey, what do you need?" He tends to do a really great job of saying, "I just need,"
Mhm.
or letting people know what he needs. I need a hug. I need space. Can I just have a moment? Right? We have to empower these children and also model and give them help them label their experience, because that's the other thing when we're seeing what we call attention tensor stuff. The child just really doesn't know how to. I don't know what's happened. I just know I'm being flooded and overwhelmed, and so also that might be a great moment to educate those mothers or those aunts and those uncles with saying, hey, he might not even know what's going on, so it might help to just say, I
Mhm.
think you're hungry, and they might say, huh, just like Cheryl said earlier, sometimes it's like just or they might feel unseen,
Mhm.
just validating what they might experience.
So what I'm hearing is a lot of white people
I love
stuff. I'm hearing white people stuff. This gentle parenting
okay.
or positive discipline, white people stuff. How do you address that concern in your work? This concern that people might be thinking, nah, that's not how black kids are raised. That's not how we're raised. That's white people
I,
stuff.
I appreciate that. Like, I got to roll my sleeves up for this part. So I think there's a misunderstanding. I think so. It's funny. I'm glad you mentioned that. So white people stuff. Let's just the gentle parenting thing. I think viscerally we just have a
Right.
response to that word gentle. So we
Right.
just throw that out. Like the thing really, whether it's gentle parenting, positive parenting, or anything, just not hyper focused on the actual
Right.
title of it. The thing what we're calling parents to, and research is showing, and parents are starting to gravitate towards this, is a parent-child relationship where honestly it's age old, but where we are recognizing how important attachment is. It's a relationship where we're recognizing how important it is that to model for kids, to teach kids. It's stuff we already know, but now we have these theories and models to that. Now we have like all of these different styles of parenting that emphasize different aspects of them, but it's emphasizing the warmth and how important feeling a warm relationship is in a child's learning and development. um,
I think it's important to
yeah.
know how desperately limits are needed for children. They need limits. It's what kind of limits, and it
Right.
really and the limits are necessary. But boy, it can be really devastating when those limits are without empathy, with just more control. And there are some moms who are afraid because they have been victims of domestic violence, and so they don't want to set any limits, and that can be harmful because the child may be still imitating what they've observed about, domestic violence, and that's not good. Or they go into the abuse. So it's really each situation is so different, and it's important to just not have a catch-all for everything.
And
Yeah. Go ahead,
can
Eric.
I just,
Sure.
I wanted to say this. I didn't think about it until Cheryl was talking, but like even and when we think about white parents and gentle parents and whatever, pre-colonialism, or when we think about the pre-transatlantic slaves, I can't speak for all cultures and races and ethnicity, but like in terms of African and indigenous folks, their belief about children a lot of times was that they're close to like divinity, if you
Yeah.
will. Like there
Yeah.
was a connection between there were somebody who was reborn or reincarnated, if you will. There was a spirit that came here for a particular purpose, and so there was this sort of reverence around children, and so though they did have discipline was relational. It happened in community. And from my understanding, I could be totally wrong, and I would love for somebody to correct me and educate me on this. There was when it comes to corporal punishment, the rise of corporal punishment and emergence of it really came with the spread of colonialism. Whereas for people who respected children almost as their ancestors, or ancestor returning, it wouldn't have just so really we're returning to, since we want it's really a return to, if we want to put it that way, it's a return to what honestly is more congruent with us, with our spirit, if you will. I can't think of the other word. Ontological, like returning to our something that's more consistent with us ontologically. And that's a big word for saying what's natural.
I so agree with Eric. I've done a little bit of study on Indigenous parenting because we think, oh, those are the old days, and we're looking at some of these new theories. There is also the
Mhm.
connection with the church, and that is also can be very strong. I had a family, a white family, where the children were very dysregulated and very, um, and there was a lot of punitive effort going into it. I actually collected 6 different Bibles to really research and study to show that there are differences in those Bibles about how to treat your child, not to just find a certain switch of a certain size and hitting them for 7 times before breakfast. It just some of them are very surprising, but you
Mhm.
also see some that are not, and it's to just go where their world is in terms of uh, adding more information to them about that.
So my usual response to the spare the rod, spoil the child argument is that the scripture, Christian scripture, also talks about children being a heritage from the Lord, or children being a gift. And so, is the understanding that this precious gift that was given to you, it is your responsibility to beat that gift? Or is it your responsibility to train that gift to become the best Christian, the best person that it can become, rather than coercing and beating it? Is it your responsibility to direct it rather than coercing and beating it? But I want to move us, I want to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about the Rainbow Project and the families that you can help, and tell listeners how the Rainbow Project can help families who want to make this transition. What kinds of services do you offer?
We started in 1980 and actually just started with younger kids, but now we're really working with a fuller range of children. But we never work with children in isolation. So we're always working with caregivers. Could be foster parents, could be adoptive, could be caregivers, grandparents. And we have 9 or 10 different programs. And the reason is because we're agile in that we can be tailoring the services for that particular family. So some may need more adjustment and advocacy in the schools in order to be able to be functioning there, or the early childhood program, or it is more parent-child dyadic work. Grief and loss is a big part of trauma.
Yeah.
Whether that person is there or not, they have grieved a parent they wish they had and don't have, even if they haven't passed away. So there are just a number of programs, and we really try to tailor that service for that particular family. And that is something that we've been really proud of, because we do more advocacy than most mental health folks do, in terms of, are the teachers trauma informed? These are vulnerable kids and families that need that more than ever, in terms of how they interact. There, are studies about teachers. There are still 18 states in the United States that still have in their law, okay to use corporal punishment in the schools. So those are some of the things that we look at, whether it's emotional or not, physical, verbal. And then we also do quite a bit of training, consulting in the early childhood programs in schools. And then we have groups for both adults and for children. We have had groups where we've included the child and the parent as well. Sometimes the actual dyadic work, parent-child, is on that secure base and trust that Eric was talking about, because it's so fundamental. And unfortunately, trauma is the source that can actually break it, even if it's been there before. Using corporal punishment, some of the studies have shown that behavior slowly can turn into child abuse. And so that's another part of it in terms of education that we do in advocating for both. We have some who are court ordered, and advocacy means really helping during those times too. And that's advocating for the parents as well. We have special service facilitators, because there is the mental health, but there's also the other parts of it.
So those are services that you provide to possibly primarily Madison, or Madison and beyond. And so I'm thinking about persons who are outside of Madison, outside of the US. What kinds of other resources, recommendations that you might want to share with other fathers who are not going to be able to connect with you?
I think Dane County is definitely something we've always served, just to put that clear, not just in Madison, but in terms of other resources. And we've done some of the public radio programs too to provide resources. That is something we have, and we will try to help if they're from different places,
Mhm.
to see if there are things that we know that we can share. I am excited about the shift that you were talking about initially, in terms of parenting with Black fathers, and I've noticed there is an author, a father, who wrote a book saying that I am a dad, but I didn't have one.
Mhm.
And so there are many more coming out that are saying, I don't want to do what happened to me. And I think the more that those are available, that certainly is totally inspiring. There is a wonderful YouTube of having dinner with dad,
Mhm.
and it really is a way that children can, if they don't have a dad, they tune into him. He's
Mm.
just has a meal with them. And it has been so popular that some of the kids continue through high school and they continue to have dinner with him in college. And it's because they're getting that connection and
Right.
feedback.
That's interesting. And I suspect Eric probably has a few children's books.
Yeah. So maybe. Are you talking about recommendations or me writing, getting ready to write them? Me and my son Amir has talked about
Rec-
co-writing, where he
recommend it?
thinks that was something
Yeah.
where he wants me and I transcribed for him.
Mm.
But in terms of resources, I think I mean some of these, Dr. Thomas, you probably already shared on your platform, but like I think the National Fatherhood
Mhm.
Alliance or initiative is a good one where you can find more local, like if you're
Yeah.
looking for something
Mhm.
locally.
Mhm.
I would say look at like local NAMI organizations for mental health specific um, sources. I'm
Mhm.
thinking nationally, because these are organizations that kind of, yeah, they have their online website, but
Right.
they also have like these resource databases. I tell you, Psychology Today, like or any therapist, like directories are really good too for seeing
Mhm.
what for finding online groups. With the way media or social media, just with the way we're connected now, you can there's ways to actually find just affinity groups, if you will, or just groups of fathers or individuals who might be having some of the same concerns as you, and being open to it. I think fathers sometimes can be isolated by communities potentially, just because of how we're socialized, and then sometimes they self-isolate. So one of the big things that I think is going to be important specifically for fathers is stepping outside of our comfort zones or what we have traditionally labeled as being a man, or as consistent with our man. Oh, I don't need that. I It's that idea that I don't necessarily need to share or verbal or to externalize my challenges. I handle them myself, and being open to finding just at least one space or one person who you can share stuff with and kind of use as a sounding board. You can go the professional route, but I think there are ways we do it informally. The barbershop still, I think, for many people is a space and place where fathers
Mhm.
have found support, specifically Black fathers, leaning into that, going even if you don't need your haircut. Churches still, get good, better, in different churches, like Cheryl mentioned earlier,
Mhm.
still are a space where fathers particularly can find support with parenting, support with just mental health, and just overall just support with growing the family that they hope to grow. Uh,
Thank you so much, Eric and Cheryl, for that. If a father walks away from this conversation and does one thing differently this week, what should it be?
I would say stop and truly think before they act. It's the feeling and the thinking and the behavior that has to come together. The thinking, feeling, and doing. Otherwise, it's kind of, we have some of those tips with our emotion coaching parenting that really helps you have a different stance, rather than just react.
Okay, thank you very much, Cheryl. And you, Eric, what one thing should they do differently this week?
That's a tough question, but
I
I
know.
went through many scenarios in my head, and I think where I landed, I think they should spend some time playing with their kid and let the kid like
Mm,
playing with no condition. Whether that's co-playing Minecraft, if you want to avoid technology, wrestle,
mm,
get on the floor and drive fake cars, Hot Wheels. But they
mhm,
should play with their kid this week. Even if that kid did something wrong, play with your kid. We're still gonna play because I love you. We'll talk about the consequences
mhm,
for that, but we're gonna play because I want to play.
mhm, mm.
Yeah.
I love the idea of getting on the floor. I think we spend so much of our lives getting off the floor, standing up on our own feet and walking around, that we forget that we have little people on the floor looking up at us all the time.
Mhm.
And we spend very little time looking down and getting down in their world. We try to get them into our world as quickly as possible and spend very, very little time getting down into their world. So thank you, Cheryl Cato and Eric Crawford, for your expertise, for your compassion, your wonderful experiences that you shared with us. Lot, I mean, I'm sure we could have another 4, 5, 6 conversations. I'm sure fathers are going to be looking for some of the anecdotes that you shared, some of the practices that they could try. But from the conversation, what I'm hearing is spanking is not a Black tradition. It's inherited trauma,
Mhm.
and that the research is clear. Even if it feels like to you that spanking might have helped you, it did not. Spanking harms, it doesn't help. There are better ways to keep our children safe and to keep them whole. We can choose different disciplinary practices, and we can choose discipline that is an act of healing and an act of love. I want to direct people to the Rainbow Project. You can contact them at 608-255-7356, or you could go to therainbowproject.net. You could also pull up the Black Fathers Pulse website, Black Fathers Pulse podcast, anywhere you could listen to podcasts, but you could also find us on YouTube. And final thoughts to you, brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers. Our ancestors survived by making their children small and obedient. We honor them by raising our children to be free and whole. That's the work that needs to be done. Let's do it together. Thank you very much for being part of the podcast today. You've been listening to the Black Fathers Pulse. I'm your host, Dr. Alvin Thomas. I'm a clinical psychologist, researcher, and director of the TriLab at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Views shared on this podcast are mine or that of my guest and are not associated with the university. Original music for our series was composed and performed by Micaiah De Silva, artwork by Isabella Acra. The podcast is produced by me and is supported by the kind contributions of you, the public, and advertisers. Follow me on Twitter at Dr_AT758, that's Dr_AT758, or the Black Fathers Pulse podcast on Instagram and YouTube. Subscribe to the Black Fathers Pulse podcast wherever you do your podcast listening, and don't forget to share and leave us a positive review.